Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network. With me, as always, Jack Fairchild. Jack, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well, Chris.
I'm going to tell you, it's been a productive and interesting last few days from a lot of different standpoints, and I want to touch on some of those things because this is a show that talks about culture and social issues and politics, but sometimes you find a weekend that kind of encapsulates those things, and I had last weekend, one of those weekends, and here recently with some things happening with my mom, some other impactful things that have occurred in my life. And you might can tell right now that I look tired. And when I was working today, my paralegal said, "My gosh, you look awful." And I said, "Well, thank you. It's always nice to have the confidence in the office when I walk in." Part of the reason is I've had roughly 2 hours of sleep in the last 2 days. And the idea or what happened was my mother, of course, getting older, she managed to break her wrist. And what happens, you can't time those things perfectly. Had she timed it perfectly, this would have happened at noon or at 1 or 2. But no, she has to break it at 10 o'clock in the evening, which means directly to the emergency room, which means, as you know, with traditional care, that means about a 9-hour wait in a stuffy traditional emergency room, which is what I did the night before last. But it gave me a lot of time to think. Because just a few days prior to that, as I was sitting there, I was thinking about those days because my oldest son, Cambridge, had a really spectacular game playing baseball, a couple of games playing baseball. Yeah. I'm going to connect the dots here in a second. You'll see where I'm getting. He did wonderfully. In 2 games, he went 6 for 7. He scored 5 runs. He had 7 or 6 RBIs, and he hit 3 home runs. In fact, 3 of those back to back. Pretty spectacular stuff. I was really proud of him. And it just so happened along that same vein, during that same period of time, he was baptized. I'm not suggesting one had something to do with the other. I'm suggesting that of all the accomplishments in the world that we think are important, and yes, baseball is important, and yes, it matters to his development, it matters to who he is as a person, those are only temporary things. In that same weekend, he made a big decision that would impact his eternal salvation, his eternal life. Those are permanent things. And when I'm there in the emergency room thinking about this season of transition in my own life and how my mom's getting older and I've already lost my dad, and these are tough times, and I'm thinking about the little tiny things in life that we think are so important, but ultimately they really aren't. Tremendous baseball weekend, but tempered by the most important thing he could have ever done. Permanence. Being tethered to something. Having a foundation, if you will. In that situation, putting baseball aside for a moment, it's a spiritual foundation. And that's kind of what America, I think, needs now more than ever before. We're chasing temporary things, and I'm guilty of it as well. We chase the shiny objects. We're no different sometimes than a raccoon in the garbage. We're looking for things that are shiny. We take that shiny thing out, we wash it, we think it's ours, and we feel very special about it. And I'm not suggesting that we should not be trying to achieve great things financially and otherwise. I think that's part of the American experiment, part of the American dream. I'm suggesting, though, in attempting to do those things and to live big dreams, we can't ignore the permanent matters, the foundational matters that really have impacted not only our personal lives, but the country as a whole. One of the things conservatism attempts to do is to hold on in part to those permanent matters, those foundational matters. And right now, man, this whole country seems incredibly uncertain. Not only uncertain in its trajectory, where it's heading, but uncertain in itself. Everybody's mad. Everybody's disappointed. Yet we have more prosperity than ever before. We have all these things at our disposal. No one really seems happy. It's almost like, once again, we've disconnected from the permanent things, the things that matter. And philosophers have discussed this for generations. And other peoples have been guilty of this as well. But never this quickly, never quite to this extent. We are so distracted. And so when we talk about conservative thought, we're not just talking about hard and fast politics. It's a way of viewing society as a whole. It's a way of viewing the political process as a whole and trying to hold on to those things that work. Permanence, foundational principles, the things that work. In the first episode we had some time ago, we talked about what this show was all about. And we talked about why it was important to have a show that wasn't necessarily picking just a red versus a blue, although we are very Republican in our orientation. I've been a Republican since I was 13 years old. But we wanted something bigger. We wanted to talk about universal foundational principles of conservatism and how that impacts the conversations that we're having today. And I think that's what I'm trying to get to right now, because we need to remind ourselves what it is we're trying to conserve. What are we trying to conserve? Well, we're trying to conserve a space free from politicians, a space free from their control. That's really the essence of conservatism. We've gotten away from that. And chasing those shiny things, we sometimes give up our own individual control and we hand it to someone else in a far distant capital. That capital might be a state capital. It might be a national capital. But ultimately, if we have abdicated or given up our powers and allowed someone else to take control of our lives, then we're not on the American path. We've abandoned those early principles. So let's reiterate from our perspective what conservatism is, what it is not, and then we're going to transition these lessons into the stories today. First of all, conservatism. I believe, and I think conservatism demands, that the individual be preeminent. The individual, above all, above the collective, the individual, above nation states, the individual, above mantras and all these divisions, the individual. The individual matters. And it's one of the things that Nazis got wrong, that socialists got wrong, that the communists got wrong. They always subjugated the individual at the expense of some bigger moment. With the Nazis, it was nationalism. With the socialists, it was some degree of collectivism. With the communists, it was about the class struggle and this process they had to go through to cleanse the critics and the interesting and intellectual people in their societies. We got to get back to the basics here. What does that mean? The individual is preeminent. That's the first rule of conservatism. The second rule is power is the problem. Reagan said it differently. He said government is the problem. But government is power and power is government.
They can be one and the same.
You can't disconnect the two. Power is the problem. And we know power is the problem because everywhere we see consolidated power, we see corruption. Everywhere we see consolidated power, we see avarice and greed and ambition, and we see people willing to do anything to hold on to that power, even if it means abandoning those foundational principles. Mm-hmm. So power here is the real struggle, the real problem, the real enemy, and government is the ultimate enemy. I don't mean that necessarily from the standpoint of just the U.S. government or the state government or whatever the case may be. It's the mindset that collectivism, government is the perfect encapsulation of collectivism, is more important than the individual. And it's the idea that governments seemingly can't operate well unless they're using force and they're controlling and manipulating, whether it's propaganda, whether it's through some law, whether it's through some police force, control, manipulation. So remember, we look back and we try to find what the founders were attempting to create here. It was an area of freedom, free from the political influence of knucklehead politicians. And that leads to the last and most important rule for today. What is it that we want? We want to conserve that space, certainly, but there's another message there. We want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. And it's a deal we'll make with you liberals at any point in time whenever you're ready to make it. We just want you to leave us alone. And we'll leave you alone. If you're an adult, we'll let you live your life.
Yes.
If you're an adult, we'll let you do whatever you like to do to pursue your happiness as you see fit. But we want you to leave us alone too, which includes my paycheck and yours,
Yes.
which includes the ability for me to educate my children, which includes the ability for me to worship whoever and however I wish to worship. I want to be left alone. The problem is, when we apply those rules, initially folks nod their heads in agreement, but ultimately, power, avarice, greed, and aggression always gets the best of us, right? And here we are.
It does.
Here we are.
And that's an interesting topic because, I mean, Ken, you talk about chasing the shiny thing. It can be, the shiny thing can be anything. It can be that object or that thing that you've wanted to purchase, but it can also be something in the political nature, whether it's, hey, look, we just got to get more numbers for our party. And
Look,
we see a lot of that stuff. That's chasing a shiny thing. If it's not getting you to a point to where we're expanding on liberty and you're not protecting the party platform, then what exactly are you achieving?
Well, here's the thing, though. For a moment, just put the party platform aside. I'm a Republican not because they created a platform. Mm-hmm. I'm a Republican because that platform seemed to me to follow the founders' original intent. Mm-hmm. It seemed to be the one most consistent, the one that calls for personal and individual liberty, the one that seems to say live and let live, the one that allows for open thoughts and open minds and open intellectual conversation. That was the party I joined. Now, to the extent that we place that banner on our backs and hoist it, we ought to defend it. And that's the other thing that's been very problematic is why it is that so many of these Republicans here lately behave like Democrats. And I know the answer. And I think you know the answer as well. If you're in a red state like ours and you run as a Democrat, you're going to lose. More than likely. And they recognize that. And so what they do is they transition over to the Republican Party, not really recognizing or valuing the ideas. They just transfer over. The party does nothing to hold them accountable. And so ultimately now we have a bunch of people inside the party that don't share our viewpoints, which to your point begs the question, what's the point of the party in the first place if that's the case? And I'm going to transition into the stories next, but I'm going to use an example here in Mississippi for that last point I was making. The entire state government is shifting dramatically to the left.
Yes.
And you can't find Democrats anywhere. These are Republicans pushing for Medicaid expansion. These are Republicans pushing for early voting. These are Republicans pushing for higher taxes. These are Republicans growing the scope and size of government. Call them what they want, but that's not real Republicans.
No, that's disgusting.
They're posers. You know what a poser is, right?
Oh, yeah. And you can see a lot of them in Washington or in Jackson.
Like when LeBron James poses as the GOAT.
Yeah, that is a true poser right there.
He had a tough time last night, or a couple of nights ago, didn't he?
Yeah, I think it was just a few nights ago he got bounced out.
Well, speaking of permanent, some things are permanent. One of those is that LeBron James always struggles, it seems, when he needs to elevate his game. Not too hard on the guy because he is pretty good, but he's not the greatest of all time. Going back to permanence. Every time I open up the news here recently, there's a story about transgender athletes. Am I missing something here? Is this the new norm in society, or is it supposed to be?
They're trying to make it that.
All right, well, we've talked about this, it seems, on and on and on. And I think most conservatives intuitively recognize there's a problem with males competing in a female sport.
Yes.
Heck, I think liberals recognize it's a problem. I guess my question to my liberal friends is, why can't you just concede there's a big imbalance of power there and join us in making sure this doesn't happen? If you value female sports, which I do, then shouldn't we allow females to compete there fairly and not against people that have a biological advantage? There's a story here, and I don't have the state right here with me, but the state's not really important. It was a question of how school districts are responding to some of this madness. It turns out there was a transgender athlete, track and field athlete, and before that athlete was going to perform his event, there were 5 middle-aged girls there, high school girls, or junior high girls, that decided to boycott. In other words, they said, we're not competing against this guy.
Which I think they should do.
Well, yeah, we're not competing against this guy. And I'll get you more details on the story, but again, it's not really the point. I'm talking about permanence today and how liberalism has transformed it. Turns out the school district punished the girls. Yeah.
Why would you punish the actual female athletes? I thought the goal here was to give women and girls in high school opportunities to excel at sports. Wasn't that the whole vision they had with this Title IX stuff?
I don't know. According to this particular article, they basically told the girls they were suspended for participating in future events. So now you literally have girls being punished for wanting to compete with girls. Now, let's just stop and let's consider the rationale behind that statement, because even my liberal friends have to confess that seems a bit strange. But they're so caught up in collectivism, they have abandoned the individual as being preeminent. They're so caught up in collectivism, to them it really is an us versus them scenario. And I don't care ultimately what you decide to do as an adult with your body. If you're a 37-year-old person, you want to transition over, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. But when you're talking about having to take the playing field, literally, and bring a sense of imbalance to it to where females can't compete, and then justify that through politics, that seems wrong. It seems wrong to me. What would permanence say? What would the conservative position be? Biology matters. Size and strength matters, especially in these contests that require a strength, right? It matters, right? And we talked about this last week, how these WNBA players, as good as they are, up against a really solid male high school team, they would be in trouble. They'd be in trouble. I don't, for the life of me, understand how we can become so polarized and so tribalist in our orientation that we can't even concede that these things aren't right. Mm-hmm. Because, look, that might be a great example of how far we've fallen. The liberals of the 30s, the 40s, and 50s, and 60s, as radicalized as they may have been, they would have never have thought this was appropriate.
Absolutely, Chris. And what's crazy, because I think you're onto something. I think this is more about the alphabet mafia community wanting to just be together. Because I found a story, Chris, where that U.S. women's soccer player, Megan Rapinoe, who's hyper liberal, and her biggest defining trait is the fact that she's a lesbian, and a female basketball player, Sue Bird, are now out there, some of the athletes that are screaming for the allowance of transgenders in female sports. Do they not understand that if this happens, it's going to take away their opportunities?
Well, in fairness, that's very convenient for her now that she's retired.
That is fair.
Now that she's retired, I guess she could.
I think they're both on their way to retire.
I'm curious where this voice for transition was back when she was first starting.
That's fair.
Playing soccer. I bet she wouldn't have been for it then, being dominated by a person that's twice her size and twice her speed. But then again, politics has infected every part of society.
Yep.
And now we have to choose sides, and we have to be resentful of one another because we projected permanence. Again, conservatives look at the past and say it must exist for a reason, and change is okay. We're not against change, but at least give us the logical reason for change.
Thank you.
And that does not include because we want to. To the other point, I don't understand wrapping these individuals as heroes. I don't get it. Now, again, I take the example I used a moment ago. What an adult does with their life, that's of no consequence of mine. It's no concern of mine. And I realize that probably offends some of our socially conservative listeners out there. But realistically, as free people in a free society, my job is to pray for people and try to help people. My job is not to use legislation to control those people.
Yes.
My job is not to judge them harshly all the time and to treat them badly. My job is to basically respect the individual, even if I believe they're making mistakes. Is that a fair assessment of conservative thought?
It's the way that I think we should all think.
I hope they would give me the same benefit of a doubt when they see me making mistakes. The point is this: when it comes to these situations, I don't understand why we have to high-five it, change the very definition of biology, right? Which is what they're asking, which is permanence. Permanence goes back to the very definition of biology itself, but they want to change it, and they want to do it because of politics. Anyway, makes no sense at all. We shouldn't be surprised because it's the same people right now that are sitting in Columbia University in tents, taking up and defending Hamas.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk
taking over campus buildings.
Let's consider this. Remember, if these liberals even had any interest in tethering themselves to traditional liberal thought, one would think they would never defend a terrorist organization. It's the darndest thing I've ever seen. And I don't want to hear the spin about how Hamas and how the Palestinian people are somehow criticized and ostracized and persecuted. You won't find more persecuted people than the Jewish people.
Amen.
It's just politics has forced them to choose sides. They're being collectivist again. They're not thinking rationally. To them, it's oppression. They can't define it. I guess it's not oppression when you want to wipe a planet off the face of the earth. I guess it's not oppression when you want to push them into the sea, as their slogans have been so eloquently placed in Columbia and Austin and other places of protest. No, that's not. You don't have an open mind. You've chosen a side, and you've chosen the side of barbarism. You've chosen the side of people that use terrorism as a means to get things done. You won't even look it in the face. It's like you see evil, but you refuse to acknowledge it because you're so busy trying to prove a political point. One more thing. This is not the 60s and 70s. You are not at Woodstock. It's funny. I think about those times, particularly in the civil rights movement, how you had these individuals fighting for their belief system, but they were fighting for other Americans. Mm-hmm. Okay, consider that. They were literally fighting for other Americans to enjoy liberty the same way they enjoy liberty. These people are fighting for Hamas to eradicate, evidently, their enemy. And it's gotten so bad in these campuses that the anti-Israeli sentiment is so strong that now even Democrats are starting to look down and say, well, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
You allowed it to get acceptable.
Yeah.
You encouraged it to be acceptable. Yeah. And now that the voices are really, really loud and perhaps even really, really dangerous, and the Jewish students don't even feel safe at these universities, now you're saying this is unacceptable. When did you think it was ever acceptable.
Well, that's what's crazy, because I saw where the White House actually put out a statement today condemning the other day, condemning the anti-Jewish, the anti-Semitism on these campuses. And what cracks me up too, Chris, and I'm sure you've thought of this too, these very people that are standing out there and trying to protest in favor of Hamas, if they tried to go live under one of those regimes, they would be put down the first time they spoke out. They would probably get put down because of the lifestyle they choose. But anytime they're trying to take up for a form of government that discourages the type protests they're doing. And it's insane.
There's a reason that part of the world, in large part, is still behind. Wherever you find radical Islam, you see oppressed societies. Let's go back to the original point of the show. Mm-hmm. You find societies that place religion or the society as a whole above the individual. These folks are not allowed to live. They're not allowed to be diverse. They're not even allowed to dress the way they want to dress. But somewhere in this wild liberal mind, you have little liberal kids defending Hamas and the Palestinian effort over in the Middle East. Now, it's mind-boggling, but it goes back to the point I was making. Permanence, there doesn't seem to be any rationale or logic behind their positions outside of simply protesting. And I said, listen, I understand. It probably gives you some degree of fulfillment, perhaps even in a religious way. Maybe you feel religious, even though you've jettisoned religious thoughts. Maybe you feel fulfilled simply by the process of boycotting. Maybe you feel fulfilled by the process of placing graffiti on a monument or whatever the case may be. But that fulfillment seems to be illusory. I'm trying to understand where real fulfillment comes from, because these people don't seem to understand what real fulfillment is. And maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe they're not founded in anything. And so they're going from one protest to the other. They go to one progressive movement to the other. But in my mind, they're allowing reason and rationale to escape what used to be traditional liberal thought. And that's strange to me, because if it keeps going this direction, I'm not sure where that ends. What I do know is this, to sum that part up. I know violence is the answer. And I know that being a racist toward Jewish people isn't the answer. And I know that the abolishment or the eradication of Israel off the face of the earth isn't the answer. Mm-hmm. So help me understand, lefties, why you can't just follow us down the proper path this time, unless it is just pure radical politics. And I think that's what we're watching right now. Don't know where it ends. And I'm not suggesting, by the way, that these people should not have the right to voice their opinions. Of course they should have the right to voice their opinions. If you want to stand in a public square and yell your brains out, you should have every right to do that. But that does not equate to boycotting, virtue blocking entrances to schools. It doesn't allow you to go in and take over a structure and to forbid others from entering. It doesn't allow you to deface property. And if you do those things, you have to pay a price. Civil disobedience. It used to be the civil disobedience. Now, you had to pay a price for it. Nowadays, they want to out. They want out every time. Yeah. And I saw the other day, right there in Columbia, there were a bunch of these folks arrested.
Yeah.
And they had a bunch of demands.
Yeah.
You know what the demands are now? The demands are now is that they, don't hold this against us.
Give us amnesty.
Give us amnesty.
I saw that.
So we're going to violate all these rules and all these laws. Again, disorder. And we're going to do it because we felt obligated or compelled to do it. Now we want an excuse to get away with it.
Can I ask a question real quick? And I want your honest opinion on this, because, again, we heard during the whole January 6th thing that this was incited, that it was incited by Donald Trump. It was incited by rhetoric from the right. When is the left going to take responsibility for their rhetoric? Because, again, if you're going to accept that narrative, which I don't, but let's just play devil's advocate here. If you're going to accept that narrative that the rhetoric led to any type of uprising, the left's rhetoric is far more inflammatory. And when you see the things that the left does and you compare leftist protesters to any protester on the right, it always seems to be more violent. Well, it seems to be more occupational in the fact that they take over buildings.
The real danger here, whether it's the right or the left, is using force.
Yes.
Breaking the law, right?
Yes.
And insisting your way is the only way.
Yes.
Because in a free society, that's not the way it's done. It's not the way it's done. But the left has taken it to a whole new level. And when you side with Hamas,
crazy.
You're on the wrong team. Now, again, going back to the original premise of this show, permanence versus where we are today. I was looking at my computer a second ago, and I found this fascinating story. And I know you probably saw me. I lost my attention span just a moment ago. Like, I'm guilty of that. I think
we both are. Yes.
Here's the thing: we spend all of our day working for the most part, but then a TikTok video or a reel pops up, and I'll lock down for 3 hours laughing at cats slapping each other.
Those cat videos are hilarious.
They're great. It's the nature of American the experiment right now, which is why we can't get anything done. We're all too preoccupied. This is a fascinating story. There's an artificial intelligent priest out there now. And I read about him a couple of days ago, and I was thinking how crazy, but how interesting that you have this priest, and he's taking confession, and he's giving advice, and people are flocking. You got that? Flocking to see him, right? And again, it's a computer. It's not really a priest. Everybody relax just a bit. It's going to be okay. If somebody wants to go and go talk to a made-up priest, who cares?
Yeah.
Right? However, now there's a problem.
All right.
There's a problem.
Got to hear it.
No, this is interesting because this started with a Catholic charity launching this AI priest. Mm-hmm. Again, it's an experiment. I don't think they really believed he was a priest. Granted, I think that's kind of silly. But it was an experiment. He was going to give advice. He was going to be kind. He was going to love, like priests are supposed to.
Yes.
I would pray he doesn't take a political position.
That's what you would hope, yeah.
But what he did do, he went a step too far, even for our Catholic friends. He, according to this story, you're not going to believe it. He took a step too far from the Catholic friends. He said that babies could be baptized in Gatorade. And they defrocked him at that stage. They defrocked him. At that stage, his career as a priest, a digital priest, had ended. And it kind of makes sense because everyone knows you can't use Gatorade to baptize, right?
No, you cannot use Gatorade to baptize.
Anyway.
If you could, then every championship sports team coach would have already been
every
baptized.
Coach in the country saved. If he wins a Super Bowl, he's going straight to heaven, apparently.
Exactly.
It's strange because this is where we are as a society, and I can't be too terribly critical because here I am covering this story.
Yeah.
And if I could have found the chatbot, I would have probably gone to talk to him.
Oh, I know you would have.
There's no question. I have a long history of fighting with AI about a lot of different things.
We talked about this last week where you got into an argument with AI.
I do like his answer here, though. One user came by to ask if he was a real priest. Mm-hmm. And this is a great computer answer because it leaves open the possibility, right? Or at least, theoretically. I know he's not.
Yeah.
Because somebody's thinking, I've lost my money. It's true, I have lost it. But his answer was, yes, my friend, I'm as real as the faith we share.
Oh, wow.
It's powerful. In other words, if you believe in me and I believe in you, that we believe in our faith, I'm just that real. What does that even mean? It's like anyway, point is that we have digital priests being defrocked. At what stage do we finally come back to at least the ability to pay attention to the issues that matter? It's fascinating, but it's not real. It's untethered.
Yeah.
There's not permanence here. It's just a temporary distraction, and that seems to be where we are. Meanwhile, with the distraction taking place with all of us, including me and you and everyone in this room, the world's fallen to pieces. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the very country that we created, or the founders created, is being decimated by politicians who have no sense, no direction, and no conviction from both parties. These people are silly, aren't they? They're just ridiculous children trying to run a country.
Yes.
And they're failing miserably. One of the ways they failed is by creating this big nanny state, specifically a regulatory state. Now, libertarian friends of mine have been screaming for 30 years about the growth of the regulatory state. People say, well, what does that mean? What's a regulatory state? Well, here's what it means. Congress is supposed to pass laws, right?
Yes.
Now, I haven't seen a word in the Constitution about the DEA necessarily, the Department of Energy, Department of Interior, Department of Commerce, whatever these various departments are. But now what Congress has done is created a bunch of subset departments, and it's given them the power to regulate. Yep. In other words, so Americans now are being regulated not by people we control. We're being regulated by people we can't touch, we can't remove from office. And these are the bureaucrats, the pinheads in D.C. and other places. They use the regulatory control of the state to tell us what we can do, what we can't do. And you say, well, how's that even possible? It happens every day. Yep. One of the most common examples I saw earlier this week was on menthol cigarettes. Did you see that? Menthol.
I haven't seen this one.
You know, I've never had a menthol cigarette, but they say it cools the throat. I have no idea.
I had no comment on if I've ever had one or not, but I was not a fan. Or I heard I shouldn't have been a fan.
They're popular enough, evidently, because the government's now trying to ban them. Mm-hmm. You can always tell when somebody's having a good time because some busybody's going to try to ban them eventually, right?
Yeah.
And so, listen, I'm not defending smoking. Everybody calm down. I realize it's dangerous, but I'm also defending the right of people to do it.
Yeah, it's your choice.
Let's talk about this. Adult people can make adult responsibilities and live with the adult consequences of those decisions. That's exactly where we as a society should be. Is if you want to smoke a peach-flavored cigar, knock yourself out. If you want to smoke a menthol-flavored cigarette, knock yourself out. Not according to the nanny state, because they implemented, just a few days ago, a new ban on these, or they tried to do it. Mm-hmm. But Joe Biden evidently put a stop to it. Let me tell you why.
I think I know.
It's terrible and it's tragic, but this is the only way to get Biden to do anything right is just pure politics, right?
It is.
Guess which demographic enjoys disproportionately the taste of menthol cigarettes?
Oh, it is the black community.
African Americans, of course. 80% of menthol smokers are African American. Yep. Joe got wind of that and said, whoa.
Got to stop this.
Got to stop this. Even the regulatory state, as much as I'm sure he loves it, he says, listen, that's a step too far.
Yeah.
That's a step too far. We're not going to make these people mad before an election. And I know what he's thinking. He's thinking, give me through November.
Yeah, then we can ban
the
menthols.
First part of January, there'll be no more menthol for anyone. And I don't get that. But again, liberals help me understand, on one hand, you come from a conclusion from years ago that you're supposed to live and let live. And this is the kind of nonsense we have to put up with. And the politicians do nothing to stop it. What do? They step away and they say, well, that's the Food and Drug Administration, or that's some other entity regulating something. And they try to avoid accountability. But it was Congress that gave them that power in the first place.
Yeah.
Yes, menthol cigarettes are bad. Yes, smoking is bad. But freedom is really, really good. And liberty is really, really good. And look, I don't understand why we don't let people choose based on the marketplace what they wish to partake in, particularly when it comes to something like this. Mm-hmm. But thank goodness Joe Biden finally made a relatively wise decision, politically based as it were, to make sure that menthol was not going to be banned by one of his out-of-control administrations. With that same point, and this is going to bore everybody to death, the Federal Trade Commission has done something just like that, but with a different part of society. Now remember, have you ever voted for the Federal Trade Commission?
Not a once.
Have you ever been able to lobby the Federal Trade Commission?
Nope.
Have you ever even shaken the hands of anybody that's part of the Federal Trade Commission?
Not knowingly.
Not knowingly. Nobody has. And if you are a part of it, you probably deny it if somebody asks you.
I would.
So FTC decides they're going to take some actions. Now, again, they weren't elected. Congress didn't pass the law, didn't pass the regulation. So the FTC, out of the blue, decides a few days ago they're going to ban non-compete agreements. Now, look, I get it. You may say, well, thank the good Lord, I can get out of my job now.
Yeah.
That's not the point. It's not the federal government's job to intervene on a state matter, much less something as extensive and diverse as the states have handled these items for years and years and years. Furthermore, I've looked at the Constitution. I don't see any power in the Constitution given this FTC or regulatory control over contracts. Do you?
No, it's not there.
This is a contract. Liberals, a contract. And if people want to enter into a bad contract, they should have every right to enter into a bad contract. And you say, well, that's not fair. Well, who's to say what's fair? The best part about liberty is what is fair to you may not be fair to somebody else. What's a bad contract to you may not be a bad contract for somebody else. But as long as they had the freedom to enter into it, and it wasn't coerced, it wasn't involuntary, it wasn't forced, as long as you have that freedom, why not let them enter into these contracts? Well, here we go again. No control over this agency. It did exactly what it wanted to do, and now it's bragging about it. They're going to create a whole bunch of new jobs now.
Of course
That's not the point. It has no authority to act in this area. Now, it's probably going to be challenged in court.
Yeah.
I would hope so. And I hope it gets to the United States Supreme Court sooner than later, because I think in its current configuration, we might be able to reverse this. Let me back up. I don't like non-competes either. I think they're abusive. I think it can be a problem. I think people should have better sense to sign one, but it's not the government's place to dictate to the entire country what they must or must not do.
And Chris, we both know why the politicians create these regulatory commissions. We know why these departments exist and why they give them those powers. So that way these people can be the bad guys. They can go back to, well, I didn't do it. Well, yeah, you did. You helped create it. You helped get the folks appointed to those positions, but they can hide behind the fact they didn't do it.
Whenever you see a politician or a group of politicians creating a commission, creating a study council, or creating an agency, it's all about making sure they won't be held accountable for a decision you're not going to like very much. Deflection. Now, with that said, before we get too far into the program, we have to recognize one of our sponsors right now.
Well, Chris, I know you were just talking about contracts, and good contract you can enter into is getting yourself a MyPillow and trying to get yourself a good night's
That's a great transition. This is why you're paid so much for this.
Hey, this is why I'm in charge of the live reads, right? And Chris, you were just talking about how you've only had 2 hours of sleep since Friday or so, I think is what you said. It's something ridiculous. Obviously, you had your MyPillow stolen again because you haven't laid down on it, because if you had, you would have already fallen asleep. There's no way you could have still been awake if you
not even, in fairness, not even MyPillow can satisfy the wildness in my brain from time to time. So
I think you could. You just got to give it a shot. You got to lay on it. The feels can form, Chris. They will help. They will help. And of course, if you go to mypillow.com right now and enter the promo code Midnight Ride, or just go to mypillow.com/the Midnight Ride, you'll be able to save up to 80% off on select MyPillow merchandise.
Outstanding.
Outstanding. Including the pillow, coffee, slippers, bed comforters. I mean, all kinds of good stuff on there.
They have slippers.
They do have slippers.
Get out of here.
We haven't got any, just like the coffee, we hadn't got any samples yet, but we need them. I mean, hopefully Mike's listening.
Poor management around here.
That's what I'm talking about.
Poor management, poor contracts. Speaking of contracts, we need to renegotiate the deal.
I think so. I think there's some hard conversations going to be coming in order soon.
Let's unionize.
6 episodes.
No. We're going to unionize.
Let's do it. Can we get government to force them to give us a better contract?
No, but you and I as a union, that would last about 6 seconds.
I agree.
We don't have enough friends to be a union.
No.
This isn't Jimmy Hoffa. Now, with that said, listen, I do appreciate the people, really. He's done Mike Lindell, and it's MyPillow. It's a wonderful product. We joke a lot about it, but it's wonderful. I do have one. And I probably need to give it a shot tonight.
Tonight is the night that you reclaim the MyPillow and you utilize it.
I tell you who needs a shot, who needs some sleep, and that's that South Dakota governor.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I've been watching this story.
Kristi Noem.
Yes, and yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't even want to say it because I know what you're talking about.
She's had a tough week, and deservedly so.
Yes, it's her own doing.
Well, whoever her press person is, whoever helped her write her memoir should be fired immediately.
I agree.
But let's go back and talk about her just for a second, because it's another example of an individual. Now, I don't know this for certain, okay? Mm-hmm. I can just tell you there have been some things she's done, some things that she's said. It causes me to question whether or not she is the person she claims to be.
I agree.
People don't realize that back when Trump was running for president the first time, she was merely a congressperson.
Mm-hmm.
She was very much against Trump. She denounced him a few times.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's something. Trump was not her kind of Republican. That's what she said. It's funny, though, when Trump acquired power, how everybody began to love him again. Because I think she knew what we knew, is that after a few years, everyone forgets anyway. But she wasn't a big Trump person, which is fine. I mean, that's okay. Maybe she came to her senses. I'm not worried about that. But I am worried about the fact that she vetoed the transgender bill there in her state. I don't know if you heard about that. They actually passed a bill, the legislature up there, I guess it was a year and a half ago, and it would have forbid male athletes from competing in female sports. She vetoed it.
This is about the time that I started to question if she was the person we were being told.
I questioned it strongly.
Yes.
And I question it now, because who does that? And then to save face, after she faces backlash, she issues a couple of executive orders. Well, executive orders aren't the way to govern.
No.
As a conservative, you should know that. Number two, you had the law passed. Your people had already spoke.
Yeah.
You stopped it cold-blooded, so I don't want to hear anything else about the issue from her. But now this. Now let's talk about this for a second, because I am biased when it comes to animals.
As am I.
I want to be real clear. Love them. I know people think conservatives are these mean people. No, we bend over backwards. Every dog we've ever had has been a rescue.
Yes.
Every cat we've had has been a rescue. We take that very, very seriously. And look, I get that sometimes on farms, the tough decisions have to be made. I don't discount her comment there at all, because we're on a farm, tough decisions have to be made. But the way I read that story, it sounded a bit barbaric.
And that's the way I read it.
And maybe that's the way the press meant it. I don't know, but it sounds like she just said, hey, this dog's not trainable. I'm going to take him out to a gravel pit and I'm going to shoot him. Did she ever consider adoption? Did she ever consider perhaps taking him to a shelter? Did she ever consider anything outside of shooting
him down?
It's weird. It's weird. And again, we're not trying to be too harsh. I realize farms are tough. But man, I lost a lot of respect for her when that happened. And maybe it was based on, and I mean, I'm not saying she can't regain it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an explanation. And maybe it was as simple as this dog is dangerous and he was violent, whatever the case may be. But based on what I'm seeing now, that seemed to be an incredibly extreme way to behave, callous and indifferent, right? And again, she's trying to be VP. So she's trying to position herself as best she can to be vice president. And she may be a good one. I don't know. What I do know is now her chances have decreased dramatically.
Absolutely, they have, and with good reason. Chris, and again, we have to take some of it with a grain of salt, because we know that the media is not going to portray anything she says in a good light. But the way that it's positioned, at least the way I read it, or not the way I read it, the way it was written, referred to the dog as a puppy. So if it was a puppy, you absolutely should try to find it another home. Something besides that being the option. Full-grown dog acting out, maybe I could buy the violent, but if it was, and again, I will admit, I am reading it from a very biased media, so I don't know if that's true.
It was from her memoirs, though. I mean,
did the memoir call it a puppy?
I don't know. Well, I don't know. Did it? I mean, I don't think the media was just said it's a puppy. I mean, there had to be some evidence of it being a younger animal. I don't know the answer to these questions. I just know that, objectively speaking, that has to hurt her chances to be VP. And I don't know, it really, outside of comments and the COVID thing, she did fine with COVID. What conservative thing has she done up there?
I can't really name any. I mean, you just pointed out that she vetoed the transgender bill. So, I mean,
I'm sure
she failed conservatives right there.
Maybe we're not being fair, and that's fine. There'll be a lot more chances for her to clear this up, and for that matter, to prove to this country that she's a conservative. And my goodness, a vice president is literally, as we all know, one heartbeat away from the presidency. Yes. I want someone like Barry Goldwater in that position.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? Let's talk about this for a second, because when Joe Biden selected a vice president in Harris, he selected a radical, true believer.
He did.
One heartbeat away. Who do we get as vice presidents? I'm not suggesting Mike Pence was a terrible guy, but I'm saying we always seem to find these very lukewarm, milquetoast type vice presidents. I want a vice president I can count on if something goes down, right?
Yes.
When was the last time we had one of those? Don't you say Dick Cheney?
I wasn't. I definitely wasn't, because, I mean, Cheney was probably running the show more than W was. So I'm not. So I think I already saw what he'd be as president. I didn't like it.
I don't know. I mean, again, we're subject to the same. I'm sure watching CNN has flawed our thought process from time to time as well. I'm sure it has. Yes. But what I want to see. I want to see strong conservatives in roles that stand to make a difference. I'm saying that for a reason now, because I'm transitioning Mike Johnson. I'm coming to you because Mike Johnson has all the wrappings, traditionally speaking, of a really nice, kind Christian gentleman. And I don't have any doubt that he is a kind, polite Christian gentleman. I'm just wondering why he seems to have fallen into the same trap his predecessors did. And that is, every time something occurs, it appears that he reaches across the wrong side of the aisle. He works with the Democrats as opposed to working with the conservatives.
Yeah.
And people say, well, it's a matter of numbers. Is it? Is it?
It could have the numbers.
You think about the whole conversation right now has taken that small number of conservatives in the House, and it's made them appear wacky. It's made them appear dangerous. what if he took the other position and pushed from the right and made the moderates appear wacky and dangerous? It seems we give the moderates a pass every single play.
We do.
And the poor conservatives, whenever they stand up and they're real about something, they get ostracized for it. It reminds me of that Marley quote. Did you see I posted it the other day?
I did.
Well, I'm going to paraphrase it here. I'm going to kill it. But basically the problem, he said, is that we celebrate folks for being fake and we condemn people for being real. And you finally find a few conservatives out there that are being real, and we treat them like lunatics. Meanwhile, the moderates playing the same old game, reaching across the aisle, watering down our very positions, watching the country go to hell in a handbasket, doing nothing to stop it, but they get those free dinners, don't they?
They do.
They get that nice seat at the steakhouse in D.C., don't they?
They do.
And they get that nice view from their office over the Capitol, and maybe see that all the way down. I could see the reflecting pool, and there's the monument way back there, and they're just sitting there feeling pretty good about themselves as we're all out here struggling to make it, and they do nothing to change it. Then they blame the conservatives for being obstructionist. Well, if obstructionism means stopping the present direction where we've been heading for the last 50 years, then we all should be obstructionists.
Amen.
We should all be obstructionists, because right now what do we have? We've got a country that's adding $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. I would like to obstruct that. We've got a country since 1974 that's operated under a series of spending maneuvers that makes it impossible to balance a budget. And we've only balanced it like 4 times since then. Folks, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
But hey, keep electing those moderates, man. It'll be fine as long as they get their perks, those free ball games to the Capitals, free ball games to the to watch hockey and basketball up there in D.C. Must be nice. But they just keep it up when we all have to struggle.
Well, Chris, I just put out an episode of my show, The Right Side, just last week, where I talked about how it's very hypocritical what we see going on, where you have, anytime you criticize, as you talked about, the moderate wing of the Republican Party, what do you always hear get thrown back in your face? Oh, we can't speak ill of our fellow Republicans. The Reagan 11th commandment. And yet they're the first. Anytime it's the conservative wing, they will call them names. You saw what they were doing to Matt Gaetz last week. So, I mean, it's just insane the level of names they'll throw out.
Here's the other problem. They argue, wrongfully so, that the obstructionist is the problem and that we have to get things done. That's the most dangerous phrase in the world,
Yes.
that government has to get things done. It's a rejection of everything our founders intended. And what do they say? We've got to govern. No, you don't. I'd rather you pack it up and go home than do what you've been doing for the last 50 years. Don't kid yourselves. They're not saving this country. They're destroying this country.
Yep.
We'd be better off if they closed that building down 9 months out of the year.
I agree.
We'd be better off because all they're doing is stirring dissension and hate and finger pointing and accomplishing absolutely nothing but the status quo. And the status quo is the very thing that's destroying the fabric of this republic. Why do we need a full-time Congress, for the love of Pete? Who are these people and why are they even up there? These are real questions that should be asked. And when I hear Republicans saying, we've got to govern, nobody asks you to govern. I want you out of my business.
Yeah.
We have to reach across the aisle to get things done. Nobody asked the federal government to do squat. I want you to take those powers and give back to the states so we can actually learn to live together again. But you don't care about that. That's an excuse you use because you're a sellout. And we have so many sellouts in our party right now. And what do? The one thing these sellouts hate more than anything in the world is to be held accountable. When there's another conservative in the room, they hate that son of a gun because he holds them accountable. There's a reason that Ted Cruz is so hated in the U.S. Senate, because when he votes like a man, it makes all the other little sugar-coated Republicans, makes them look bad. It makes them look bad because we see now who the true conservative is. And so they hate him for it. Same thing happened in Jackson when I served. Same thing happens all in state capitals across this country. They're a bunch of charlatans. And they're playing us for fools. And when somebody holds them accountable, they get their feelings hurt. But that's exactly what we have to do, is to hold these people accountable, or nothing's ever going to change. Speaking of that, Republican Party, where have you been? Where have you been? I mean, I know you have an apparatus, and I know sometimes you get together and have cocktail parties, but I'm not really seeing action here. I mean, I know you try to elect people, but that's only one part of the component. If you elect someone who's not really a conservative, then you fail to hold him accountable when he stabs you in the back time and time and time again. What's the point of your existence? It's frustrating because we have a chance, and I think it's a dimming opportunity, a dimming chance to turn things around, but only if we're principled. And we have to hold these people accountable, but we don't.
No.
We don't. And that's part of the problem. So, what are we trying to do for this show? Permanence. We're trying to hold them accountable, not based on parties, but based on permanence, based on things that matter, foundational principles. It's not about R versus D all the ways, although the Democrats are absolutely dangerous and destroying this country. It's about foundational principles. That's how we started the show. That's how we're going to end the show. Foundational principles. What are they? The individual is preeminent. Preeminent. He deserves dignity, rights, equal protection under the law, and justice with our system. Is that hard?
It shouldn't be.
Number 2, power is the problem. Always has been, always will be. In the long course of human history, all the atrocities you can think of, whether it's the abuses in Cambodia or Stalin or Hitler or even the Trail of Tears, it was always about too much government and giving it too much power, allowing it to run over the rights of individuals. Government is the problem. Power is the problem. What are we trying to conserve? A place free from politicians, a place free from those nice haircuts and those firm handshakes and the BS they push every single day. We want out. We want to be free again. Leave us alone, which is the last point, the first thing I started with the show. What do we want more than anything else? How about just let us govern ourselves? Give us some justice. Give us some peace. Get out of our lives. Quit playing politics with my children's lives. Quit trying to score cheap points on CNN and Fox. Give us a break for a chance by getting out of our business for a chance. The states can manage this just fine. Local governments can manage this just fine. D.C. has proven it is incompetent. And as long as it leads the way, we'll struggle. And I'm sick of struggling. And I'm sick of putting up with these people. And if you're not, you just haven't been paying attention, which is probably accurate because right now it seems no one is paying attention.
Amen. I mean, that's well summed up. People aren't paying attention, and as my t-shirt here says, a lot of times I feel like we're living in the dumbest timeline because you look at some of these headlines, you look at the way that people are acting, and you just question what point in history am I living in? Because you go back and you see some of the great timelines that we didn't get to experience, some that we did get to experience, and now you get to hear, and we're actually arguing over what a woman is and other issues that just make you scratch your head.
Society as a whole, nations as a whole, there have always been ups and downs. There have always been good timelines and bad timelines. It happens. It's part of it. But up until this point, we at least shared some common denominators. We at least usually allowed reason and logic to prevail. The big disagreements at the time, years and years ago, were simply about minor inconveniences, whether there's going to be a Medicare program or whether there's going to be a Medicaid program and how it's going to be funded. Now we're going right to the heart of what it means to be an American because we've rejected religion, we've rejected a common language, we've rejected patriotism outright. And so it begs the question, is there anything that really binds us any longer? And that's the question that these future generations are going to have to answer because if all we've got are finger pointing and name calling, it's going to be a tough few years in this country. Amen. And I'm telling you, if we can just get back to those foundational principles and leave each other alone for the most part, allow folks to govern themselves and get Washington out of the picture, we can find peace again. But as long as those knuckleheads are here, there's not going to be peace, not in our time. Now, with that said, this has been Chris McDaniel's America, another fun show. Jack, as always, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
This is the Midnight Ride Network. I hope you've enjoyed. I look forward to next time. Have a good day.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. MyPillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of MyPillow.
The MyPillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last MyPillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. MyPillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new MyPillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.